You've been gaslit into believing that labeling your child with ADHD and getting them on psych meds is the best treatment for them. We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Tara Lynn and therapist Jen, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Sheila Matthews. Sheila is the co-founder of ablechild.org, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring that parents and children are fully informed about the risks associated with psychiatric labeling and drugging in the public school system. In 2001, Matthews made history as the first mother to successfully testify for the passage of a state law in Connecticut that prohibits school personnel from recommending psychotropic drugs to parents. Her advocacy has extended nationwide, where she has worked to remove dangerous antidepressants from use on children in state care and has pushed for greater transparency and accountability from both the pharmaceutical industry and government agencies. Welcome, Sheila, to the show.
Thank
You're a
you.
rock star. Oh my gosh. Like, you're my spirit animal right now. Like, I'm just like, holy man.
Wow. It's been a journey, ladies.
I'm
Oh my
sure.
goodness. Yeah, we
Yes.
are so curious to hear a little bit more about that journey. For those of you that are listening, Sheila's website, ablechild.org, and even if you're here watching on YouTube, she's got that right in her name title there. Make sure that you guys check that out. We actually went to that and we pulled a little more of your bio out because what Sheila had given us was just one little line in our Google form she filled out. And we're
Yeah.
looking at the website going, holy shit,
What?
nope. This is
No.
going in there and this is going in there and this is going in there. So you guys have to check it out if you haven't already. So we know, Sheila, there is a story behind this for you. There is a start for you. Let's start there.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm a mom. I have two sons. And at the time, my son was 7. And I was living in New Canaan, Connecticut, a pretty affluent town. And I was getting ready for a meeting with my school. And the night before, I turned on C-SPAN and I saw another mother testifying before Congress how her school had said, you need to put your son on. It was Paxil, I believe, that her son was put on. You have to do this in order for him to attend school. She didn't recognize her son any longer. And she drove around the parking lot and saw him like over in the corner, like shuffling his feet. And when I heard her testify, I was like, oh my God, tomorrow morning I'm going into my school and they're going to be telling me the same thing because they had already given me pamphlets about this ADHD label. And so I called her up, I called Congress, I got her number. And I was like, you don't know me, but I'm dealing with the same thing right now. And I don't know what to do. And she said, you know what, I'll walk you through this, but do me a favor. When you go to school, tell them that you don't believe ADHD. And I was like, all right. I mean, I had nothing else to lose because I didn't want to put my son, who was very thin and young, 7, on these powerful drugs, So that's how my story started with Patty Weathers, and she's the co-founder. We bonded that day. I went to the meeting and I said, I don't believe in ADHD. And they did not know what to do with me. And so I went towards a different avenue. I went to tutoring. I spent my own money kind of homeschooling him on the side. And then when he would have problems at school, I would say, call me and I'll go pick him up. And I know a lot of parents don't have that luxury to do that. So we decided to form Able Child.
Oh my gosh.
I'm in awe because I needed you back in 2007, probably 2000. No, probably 8, something like that. Anyway, like, I'm just in awe because Jen and I have very similar stories, actually, still, and Jen is operating in that framework in 2025
Wow.
with her kids, right?
Wow.
So, and I did it way back when, same thing. I just didn't have the balls that you did.
I don't know where they came from. I think seeing
I
Patty.
just called Congress. I love it. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't
just
know who
like,
to call. I had no
yeah.
idea who to call or what to
Pennsylvania
do.
6
Like,
5000. I don't know. Is that the phone number address? I don't know. I love it, Sheila, where you're just like, well, then this is what I did.
I did that because I saw her and I remember her like face and her like in front of this congressman saying, I don't believe in ADHD and this is what happened to me. And I was like, oh my God, like I need to speak to this woman. And yeah, it was kind of bold of me to do. It was a God moment. You know, you just
Right.
one moment you see something and you act on it, and we're best friends. We're like sisters now, and we've been through a whole big journey of trying to reform this overwhelming system that it just wants nothing to do with us, you know. So
I
we're
don't
brothers.
I don't understand where schools got their hands in mental health so deeply. I don't even understand where that came from.
Mm.
The idea, because like you, I did sit down and I was told, take your child to the pediatrician and get them on medication. I was told that. And I said, I will absolutely not do that. And you don't know who you're talking to. And that was it. And just like you, then I pulled in all these supports and I keep telling people, the school isn't the end all be all for your child. Like it is not everything. But I sit back and I think, where in the world did school become the driving force for mental health care or for diagnosing or for pointing out your child is, mentally ill,
Mm.
this because in effect, if you say ADHD, like you're saying, this child is mentally ill.
Mhm.
Um, do you know where that came from? Do you have any insight into this or how
Oh,
they're yep.
yes.
Yes, great.
Yes, I do, because
Awesome.
I researched it, and so basically, it started out in the 1970s, and it was a carve out in the smallest state in the country, which was Rhode Island. And it was sponsored by Ciba Geigy, which was a drug company. So what they did was they convinced a small school system through Bradley Hospital in Rhode Island to to start diagnosing these children with attention deficit disorder. And then it quickly spread throughout the country. So it was a lobbying effort through the pharmaceutical companies. And what they did was they were able to go to the lawmakers and convince them that, well, the reason why these kids aren't learning is because they have a lack of attention. And then they lobbied to do a small experiments in the 1970s, and it's documented, through presidential libraries. Able Child and our staff have gone through where it came from, but that's how it started. So it was voted in by psychiatrists. There's no such thing. It's not like your child has a deficiency of Ritalin or a deficiency of these
Right.
pharmaceutical drugs in their body. Here's a list of behaviors, and based on these behaviors, we as psychiatrists decided that this is a disorder called ADHD. I had no idea. Like when I called Patty that night, I had no idea that I was stepping into this vortex of corruption. I had
Right.
no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
No idea.
Right.
Um,
And so I'm curious to know, can you tie in a little bit, is where did the checklists come into play within this, Sheila? Because even on your website, you guys talk just briefly about that. And Terry and I have, this is like one of the hills we die on, right? As therapists and people who, and also like we do assessments within our practices, psych assessments for people. And we've talked about these checklists and how unhelpful they are and how quickly they label and then lead to a prescription, especially for children. Can you tell us just a little bit about these checklists and
Yeah, sure. So I didn't know that I was part of the process of labeling my son as mentally ill. So the teacher has a checklist, the school psychologist has the checklist, and then you as a parent are given the checklist. And I can remember some of the questions was, does your son not listen? I'm like, well, he's 7. Okay. Yeah, he doesn't listen.
Mhm.
Does he get up from his seat? That was one of the teachers' checklists. Yeah, he gets up,
Yep.
So a combination of me filling this checklist out, the teacher filling the checklist out, and the school psychologist, based on that, they were like, yep, your son has this. And then I was handed pamphlets of, one drug might not work. You should try another one, but this is the
My
best.
God.
This is the best treatment for this ailment that your child has, which you're blown away because all of a sudden you realize you participated in actually diagnosing your son or your daughter. And I don't think there's enough informed consent, which our mission is informed consent regarding these drugs in this industry, is that you're not being told that it's subjective, and your child grows. I mean, like over time, behaviors change.
Yes.
It's so subjective. It's so um, it's so flexible that anybody can be diagnosed as mentally ill. So it's a huge industry. It's definitely embedded in our educational system, and it's growing. It's not, I wish I could say, hey guys, we solved the problem, there's no more ADHD, and, we're not going to be drugging the kids. No, no, no. This is a huge industry that has their grip so deep into the system that, not just one woman or two women, two moms are going to solve this. This has to be an awakening on a level across the board, because the children, what we're doing is we're medicating generations, and and the industry just benefits constantly off of it. It's quite sad.
It's very sad. And so your mission is, if I'm getting this right, is to not have those pamphlets in schools anymore, to really to not talk about it, or what is the mission within the school exactly?
Really great question. We're into informed consent. So if a child, first of all, they should not be diagnosing children with mental illnesses in schools. These are teachers, they're not doctors. Your
Right.
child could have other ailments, your child could have a vision problem, a dental problem, an actual physical,
Autoimmune issues,
every.
right? Like, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
So the misdiagnosis is so overwhelming, but our mission is to look, if you're going to do this, which they clearly still want to do, diagnose these children, you have to tell the parents that it's subjective, that the recommended drugs are very powerful and dangerous and addictive. So if you tell the parent all this and they still want to do the checklist, well, that's on the parent, so we're not looking to ban anything. We're not looking to pull these checklists. I mean, I think it's fraud, 100% fraud, to do a checklist on a child and make a mom feel that her child suffers from something they cannot do a blood test on, a brain scan on, nothing. So that's a crime against your child.
Mhm.
But if they're going to do that, then they have to be honest about it, that it was voted in by
Yes.
psychiatrists, that
Mhm.
these drugs are not a cure, that they lead to addiction, they lead to homelessness, they lead down such a dark path. that you have a hard time getting off of these drugs once
See,
you.
this is a point that is argued incessantly that if you don't medicate an ADHD child, they're more likely to have addictions. They're more likely to be homeless. They're more likely to not, be a well-adjusted adult. Like these are the things you're saying. The opposite. You're saying that the research actually does show that when you medicate, the chances of addiction are higher. When you medicate, the chances of homelessness are higher.
Yes.
So that's interesting. I'd like for you to talk about that a little more if you're willing to do that.
Sure.
Because it's right against everything that people are the general consensus, right?
Right.
Yes.
So the Berkeley study is a very famous study that parents should be given. And that says that these are gateway drugs to addiction. That's what that entire Berkeley study said. They don't tell the public about that. So this study was done over a long period of time where they looked and they evaluated, and yes, they are addictive. Also, you could just look at the DEA. The DEA classifies methylphenidate, which is Ritalin, as like cocaine.
Yep.
So this is just facts that they don't have on their side. The industry, the medical model of psychiatry, makes claims which are not true. And then the worst part of this entire thing is the government has allowed them to gather the data to in order to get funding, you need to have positive outcomes. But when you have the same industry that's drugging the child, collecting the data, and then washing the data, what I mean by that is one category that is left out is when it comes to violence, when it comes to doing criminal, like how these drugs affect the child, they leave out the category of psychotropic drugs. So like in death investigations, they'll say there's illegal drugs, like heroin, but they will not have a category that says this person was given psychiatric drugs. So they're tainting the data. I don't believe anything the psychiatric industry says. I think that they are not only liars, the facts are on our side, but the money and power is on their side. That's just the reality of it.
So you're saying when something violent happens, like when in the news, like a shooting or whatever, they're only looking at the illegal substances that might be in the body. And I'm going to make a quick argument here too. I don't know what the data says on this, but this is like my theory of this, right? So if they're not even looking at prescribed medication, they're not reporting that. And I would argue that they need to look at that not only in their system currently, but having been on these things historically. Because what we know is just because it's cleared your body doesn't mean it's cleared your brain.
Mhm.
And people struggle in these spaces for
Yes.
years after they
Yes.
are off psychiatric medications. So I think even that information is relevant when we're studying these violent circumstances, right? So
Mhm.
not just
Yes.
what's here now, but what has influenced the brain and the brain development and all of these things historically for that person. I think that's relevant. But again, just like you said, they're not gonna look at that because it's the fox watching the hen house, right? Like, we have to protect
Right.
our own interests
Mhm.
here rather than the interests of the public. So, that would
Mhm.
be a hard thing for anybody to study, but I think it's relevant.
Well,
Knowing what we know about
well, on that.
akathisia, withdrawal, and, just as of me. So,
Well, you're right on point there. And Able Child passed a landmark piece of legislation in Tennessee where it is required now in a mass shooting that that the therapeutic level of psychiatric drugs are tested on the deceased person. And think about that. They have been bypassing the therapeutic level. So if you're being treated with psychiatric drugs, they're not going to test for a therapeutic level because they're like, well, they're receiving those drugs for therapy. So they get to not even have that in the category because it's
Sure. Yeah. It's prescribed,
It's
it's
a good thing.
legal. They're taking it as prescribed, like there's all these assumptions that are being made, right? So why test that?
right. So
Right.
we fought really hard to get this new language in the testing of the deceased, So
Mhm.
then we're moving to Wyoming. And in Wyoming, we're trying to make that even stronger because the definition of a mass killing is, I think, 4 or more people have to die in order to do this testing. So we would like to make it, well, if anybody commits a crime, what are they on? I mean, we do it for alcohol, we do it for DWI, you're impaired, you
Mhm.
know, right now we've written so many different articles on so many different industries because we literally in this country are drugging everyone. Our organization started focusing on children
Yeah.
and the drugging of children in public schools, but we come to find that pilots are allowed to be treated with antidepressants and
Now they just changed that again. From what I know, they didn't used to be, and now they are lifting that, and that scares the crap out of me,
right.
actually. Yes.
Exactly. So, do you, and our whole mission is informed consent. So, do you have the right to know that your pilot is being treated for depression and is on a mind altering drug? What about your surgeon? I mean, it's everywhere. So I think that, shows like yours really discussing this issue
Mhm.
really benefits the public because it's devastating to our society where the people that are actually doing the drugging, calling themselves experts and being tremendously funded by the government are creating these lies. It's
Mhm.
just it's really quite disgusting. It's such corruption. It's a humanitarian crisis as
Mhm.
far as I'm concerned.
Well, the ease, there's something that seems to be common across the board, regardless of. I was thinking about this as you were talking about children, okay, and even as adults, okay. The ease at which a small child, a 7-year-old, for example, can be put on a stimulant for ADD or ADHD, okay. There isn't a significant amount of work, and I'm going to just use that's my word, put into getting a kid to a space where they are diagnosed with this and given this medication. So for parents that are out there right now, and if you have went through this with your child, you know this process. There are checklists that are given, okay, to the teacher, to the counselor. It goes home. Like the Vanderbilt, for example, is one that more recently I've done some testing cases on for kids that were diagnosed very young based off these checklists. But it's not as though there is a process that then happens where, okay, now we're going to put you with a counselor or we're going to put you with a mental health professional. We're really going to do some more assessments.
Mm.
We're going to sit down. Maybe we need to do some more testing. Maybe there needs to be, 6 months to a year of doing some like counseling with someone and talking through some of these
Mhm.
things. Let's get a really in depth medical history and like all that stuff that doesn't happen. These are the checklists. The school says, yeah, you really need to get to see your pediatrician now. Here's where it's at. That
Mhm.
pediatrician meets with a child once.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like there are tons of appointments, meets with that child once, diagnoses that child, says, oh, we did these checklists, which, by the way, everybody, these checklists are not meant as diagnostic tools, and yet they are used as diagnostic tools. There is not a shit ton of science behind this, a longevity behind this. They're checklists, everybody. So
Well, let's just add in that the checklists, most of them are created by Big
They,
Pharma.
they are. And I was doing some research before this show because I was trying to dig in the Vanderbilt and look up the individual that created the Vanderbilt, Mark
Oh.
Walrek, because I was trying to, because I'm like, I bet you there's ties. And I went for about 45 minutes. I'm like, okay, I can't find it. So I need to stop digging for something. Maybe this guy's legit. I don't know. Right. I don't know where he got all of his kickbacks from. But then you go to the doctor, right? And the diagnosis is given, the medications are started. There isn't a whole bunch of intervention in between, right? We're not doing blood tests, we're not looking at medical history,
Mhm.
we're not doing brain scans, we're all these things, right? It's no different though than even as an adult. So you would think for our kids, we would do this a little different, but we don't. It's the same for an adult. You go in, you have your appointment, you get your 20 minutes. If you're lucky, you have your symptoms, that the prescription is given. So I think it's important to point that out, because for people who maybe don't understand this process or have never went through this with their kids, there isn't a ton of work, steps, science that goes into here's the label, here's the med.
Mm.
It's a checklist,
It's a
kind of like when you're an adult.
Mhm.
It's no different, right? You go in and you
Well,
have a checklist given to you,
I
and
feel
we're
like
diagnosed.
I feel like the conversation around it has changed a little bit too, because I don't remember back in the day, uh, when going through this with my kid, that it was called a neurological disorder. It's now you hear that all over again. It's a
Yeah.
neurological disorder. It's neurological. You were born with it. It was, neurological. And I just go, well, then prove it. Like,
Mhm.
then if it's neurological, then
Mhm.
every child, as far as their diagnoses and medicating,
Yep.
you need to prove that it
Prove
is
it.
neurological.
Go give
Prove it.
David Amen a call. Go get your kid to
Something. I
Amen
don't know.
Clinics, get their brain scanned, and then do it a year later and see what it looks like. See if
Yeah,
there's deficiencies. See, because you can't.
You
but
can't.
they're
They
also now
lie.
targeting women. Women are the next target. Menopausal, perimenopausal, menopausal women are the next ADHD target,
Mhm.
and all these women are coming on going, now I know why I felt like this my entire life. And I'm like, I've had a neurological condition this whole time. And I'm like, but you haven't. You're just in menopause. Like, like
Yeah,
it's
it's
they're shifting target. And you can tell whenever, advertisements come on and they shift a target,
mm,
their target audience, that they're moving to the next thing,
mhm.
right? And like you, Sheila, I was sitting in there early on in my career in a principal's office getting yelled at by multiple staff to get my kid to the pediatrician and get them medicated. And I left that meeting thinking, what if people came in here and they weren't as obstinate as me? I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew that one thing, that this was not going to happen. I
Mm,
knew that going into it because I had a feeling, right? And I was like, that's not going to happen for him. And by the way, fast forward years later, he talks to me now. He's in his mid 20s and well adjusted, college graduate, employed, all the things, right? Never medicated. And he goes, thank you for not medicating me, mom.
wow.
And and I was like, "You're welcome.
Wow.
You're welcome, because it could have been that easy, right?" And then we were on a cascade of psychiatric medications
Mhm.
along with, diagnoses that could impair some, work that he was looking at, right? Or getting into the military.
Yeah.
Jen's done things for getting into the military, getting into federal government work. They ask you
Mhm.
about all that stuff, and they
Oh
make you
yeah.
produce those, diagnostic paperwork. Like, because he was applying and we were looking and I went, "Oh my god, it pops up right here," even though it says, "We won't really hold this against you,
Yeah.
but you need to check all the boxes and we might request all your files, by the way." And I'm like, what in the world is happening? I don't think parents realize that what you do when they're 7 can
Mhm.
impact them when they're 25. I don't think
Mhm.
that there is that realization at all in any way, because once you get these diagnoses, they don't just fall off. You know, they
Well,
are
and I think
there
that's
somewhere.
part of the informed consent piece as well. And I'm
Yes.
curious to know for you, Sheila, what are the things that you've learned along the way, right? Because you fell into this like corrupt vortex that you had no clue, right, was going to happen. Like this one phone call led to right led
Yeah.
to where you're at here. You had no idea. I'm curious to know what are the pieces regarding informed consent that maybe shocked you the most, or the things that you learned as you started to jump into this that you had no clue about? The things that you preach the most are like, this is something parents like right at the jump
Mhm.
should know about before making a decision. What are some of those bigger ones for you?
I think the checklist itself, I learned over time that these are mostly really bright, gifted children. Like, I think for me, it was such an awakening that almost like they took the identity of the gifted and creative child and switched it to an ADHD child because that's where all the money is. So if you're gifted and creative, I remember saying, well, my son, he is so verbal and I think he might be gifted. You're laughed at, right? So that part,
Oh.
I felt like I had no idea that some of these characteristics are the very characteristics we need as a society and as humans to kind of create the next generation. Like the smart people, even though they're annoying at times, they're the ones that we need the most sometimes. That's how I feel. So I was kind of devastated to learn that a lot of these same characteristics mirrored that of the gifted child. So I feel like for the informed consent part, I think that they really need to tell that to parents. This authoritarian position that the school takes with the government, that they can label you mentally ill when you're really gifted, is such a crime. And then the other part were the drugs. I mean, I never put my son on the psychiatric drugs because Patty saved me. So Patty's work and her courage to go down to Congress and testify saved me and turned my life so differently. The outcome, like you were saying with your son, and is what you do when your child's 7 does impact their future. So,
Mhm.
I feel as though I was saved, and the drugs, try this drug, and if this drug doesn't work, try this, or there's a mixture. Maybe you need 2 drugs. To me, that's so I feel so heartbreaking that we believe this industry at all. I mean, I recently, I'll just jump into this really quick. There were hearings on the dangers of SSRIs, the antidepressants, on pregnant women. And
Oh, yeah. We've been on watching that and
yeah,
talking about it. It's so
okay.
gross.
That to me is like such a milestone. And it's like we have psychiatry and the drug companies on the ropes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Whereas these people within their own industry are like, we reject this model and these drugs are dangerous for pregnant women. Well, we're going to be doing an article in a couple of days. A little spoiler alert here is that what the industry did, the hardcore, we want to label and drug your child and all of society, they went to the lawmakers and had 4 Congress people draft up a letter to Secretary Kennedy, who has so much courage to be addressing any of these issues that we haven't talked
Yep.
about in years. And they wrote a letter to him saying, how dare you allow this panel is scaring parents and they're scaring. And I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible drama that is playing
Yes.
out. And it is so good for our country. It is so good for our health. It is so good. When you cling on to, when we were talking earlier about when you claim, well, if you don't use this drug, your child is going to become a drug addict. What proof do you have of that?
Right. Right.
You know, what proof when these experts were on this panel, and they were like, we don't know enough. This is harming the baby in utero. I mean, to
Yes.
me, and then to have Congress write a letter to, and we're going to be writing on this, that is just so
Yes,
shocking.
Cannot wait.
you guys did one in July, actually, that was on your website about pregnancy, and I'm like, it's gonna piggy right off that one, I bet, because you guys
Yeah.
have one out there, and I was like,
Do you
"Oh,
know
this is
though,
what happened."
immediately after that FDA panel came out, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, made a statement
Yes.
like within a day or
Yes, they
two
did.
of this. And the statement was these meds are completely safe for a
Yep.
pregnant mom. And I was like, shut the fuck up. But literally, it was like,
That'd be
and there were
Terry on Capitol Hill. Like,
yeah,
that's her
shut the
poster.
fuck up.
Shut
Anyway,
the
so
fuck up. Like, seriously.
I love it. It's so true. You're like, how can you say, where is your evidence?
right.
It's this main argument for 20 years we've been having: drugs good, diagnosis good, drugs bad, diagnosis false. And it's like, when do we get to lay out the receipts? I'm a guest sometimes on Steve Bannon's show, and he's always like, you have
Yep.
to show the receipts. You can't just
Yeah,
make these
yes.
claims, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe if we had a category that had psychotropic drug use on when you're gathering death information at a crime scene, and you're able to fill that category out, maybe then the data will be live for us to see. But they're covering up the data. I mean, when you're withholding evidence, who's right? Is it
Yes.
the person that's withholding the evidence, or is it the person that's saying, we have these receipts here, and we have plenty of receipts? I mean, like the Andrea Yates, she was the Mothers Act. We fought against the Mothers Act, where they wanted to screen all these mothers who were pregnant for depression. We fought against that. We lost. Okay. So Andrea Yates was on a cocktail of
Yes,
psychiatric
she
drugs.
was.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's evidence right there. Was she mentally ill, or did the cocktail of drugs warp her mind so much where voices were telling her, you must kill your children?
Right.
Then we have a case in a fascinating case in Massachusetts, where a mother killed her kids, and then she tried to kill herself. She tried to jump out a window, and she lived. Okay. And now they're pursuing charges against her. And her attorney happens to be taking up the fact that she was given 13 different psychiatric drugs prior to the mass killing of her own children. Then we had the Wyoming case of the mother who killed her children, and she was on a cocktail of psychiatric drugs and another drug that I can't think, ketamine, which is very dangerous.
Oh, sure. She's doing ketamine therapy.
Yeah, so she's
Yeah.
doing that, and she was on a psych drug, and
It just wasn't the right cocktail though.
must not
She
have been,
I mean, that's what they say, right? It's just not you're just not on the right drugs. You're just not there. Like that's the thing. And I want to go back to the children thing too, because I think it's predatory to moms, because moms are usually the ones sitting in those meetings. Sorry, dads, but usually the moms are the ones, with the school stuff. And it is such a load of mom guilt.
Yes.
Well, if your kid had diabetes, you would put them on insulin, right? Like this mom guilt and shame. And I think any mom who's questioning this, continue to question it.
Yes.
Question it openly,
yes.
honestly, and a lot.
And
right?
I think I want to go back because I only have a few minutes, but I think this is so important, Sheila. You said this earlier and you expanded on this. And it's this idea of like state versus trait. Maybe I'm going to call it that, right? And how your child at 7 is going to be extremely different than your child at 7.5 and at 8 and at 8.5 and at 9, right? Okay. So we are told that there is a trait, a characterological malfunction, a trait that is wrong with our children, which is why we need to put them on these drugs. When in fact, like what you did, Sheila, you proved that actually this is a state of being. It is a space that my child is at in their life. And this whole idea of parents who are like, well, I'm not resourced enough to try all the other alternatives,
Mhm.
right? Pulling your kid out of school, giving them some private tutoring, getting them back in and being on call if you need to come get them. Like all these interventions and these options, people can do that. People choose not to. And I know this is going to sound really harsh, like as a
Mhm.
mom and a parent, and other people are like, oh, well, then that's because you're well resourced, Jen. You've got the money, you're from an affluent space. No, actually,
No,
I
because
think I think
the
it's bullshit.
majority of moms will say, "I will do anything
Anything
for
for
my
my
child.
child.
I will do
And that's
anything."
so this whole idea, I think, of state versus trait is really important for parents to think about, because you might have to do something for a year. You might have
Mhm.
to. But in 1 year, I can guarantee you, if you try other things, everything else other than the drug, I can guarantee you that in a year, you won't even need to be having that conversation anymore, because this is a state and this is what they are going through.
I totally agree.
Okay.
But why are we put in this position? I felt like when my son was in school, I was every day I'd send him off on the bus. I was like, oh my God, how is my day going to unwind? Am I going to have to go pick him up and this and that?
Yep.
We've moved so far away. We're behavioral health oriented. Everything's about behavior, behavior, behavior.
Mhm.
Nothing is about teaching and
No.
learning skills of
It's compliance, right? We medicate to compliance, so they sit still, so they
communication.
listen, so they're quiet, so they're right, like that's what
Yeah.
it is. You're right.
Well,
Yeah.
so I think we have to we have to be able to get the drugging of children, the diagnosing out of the schools, or give an option. If you have, let's say, one door of the psychologist's office, you could go through that door and get your child identified and do the whole behavioral health thing. Or you have the able child door where you get tools and you get resources and you learn and you communication skills and that sort of thing one-on-one. I think we eventually will most parents will pick the able child door versus the ADHD door. I
Yeah.
really truly believe that. But right now we have a government that only supports the ADHD door. What we saw in those hearings a couple of weeks ago was an industry fighting within itself to break free of that psychiatric drug model, and I wholeheartedly support that 100%. We have to encourage these brave psychiatrists and psychologists to take over the system, but we have the lawmakers writing letters to Senator Kennedy saying, these drugs are vital when they're not vital. We do not have a deficiency of antidepressants. We just don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We have a
I'm
Well, this is
deficiency of nutrients, and so, when we add together, like, what kids are eating during the school day or not eating during the school day,
yeah.
I think that plays an important role too. When you start with a sugary thing and you don't eat any protein until maybe you get home, maybe at lunch, a chicken nugget, that child is deficient in
Yes.
protein and also doing the blood sugar highs and lows. Like, there's so many
Yeah.
reasons, and if we
Yeah.
were just start asking the right questions and start
Yes.
listening differently, I think we can get to the root of these problems, and it's not just compliance and pop a pill, and
Yes.
I'm so tired of that shit.
And
Like, I'm
that's
just,
what came out of my mouth in the meetings at school. Like, I'm like, he's getting irritable because he's hungry, and he can't sit
yeah,
still because he's hungry. And I'm
Mhm.
going through the timeline with all of the teachers, and they're looking at me, and I said, how about we insert 2 more extra snacks for him, and he's gonna get a protein snack. I'll pack it, and he
yep.
gets to have that. And
Problem
what do you
is hold
know?
on,
What do
problem
you
is,
know?
and I've been
Got
involved
better.
as a professional in IEPs, and in those IEPs, I said, "Right in there, protein snack breaks every 3 hours for this kid." Schools would not do it
Yeah.
because if it's in an IEP, they have to provide it. So, it can't be parent provided in an
Oh, see,
IEP.
there's where I got
So
lucky. We didn't do the
Yep.
IEP.
Yeah, well, so that's the other thing. If you don't go down the IEP route, then you can just go in and keep having
Got some
meetings and saying these
flexibility.
things. You have more
Yep.
flexibility. But
Yep.
if you're trying to get stuff like that into an IEP, you're not gonna get it, even though it's in the best interest of the child to eat like that. And
Mhm.
also, the biggest trend that I see in elementary schools and middle schools is behaviors that are out of control, but primarily, and this again, this is not research based, this is just observational based things. These kids are on medications or have been on medications since they were little people.
Little.
Mm,
And their behaviors are out of control, and it's just met with more medications.
right.
Instead of like this idea, like, where did we just decide that we're so stupid that we can't put it together that this kid is probably struggling because of these medications? Let's
Mhm.
see that. Oh, wait, we'll do a med wash, and that's their new baseline for the next 2 weeks, and they're out of control even more, which means they need more meds, right? No, it means their brain has not yet reached homeostasis again without the medication. And so that's why I think when you have somebody that does a, egregious act of any kind, we need to go down into their history and see, even down into, did their mom take psychiatric meds during
During
pregnancy? I
pregnancy.
feel like that is important too. Like, I feel like it is all important. So I don't know where it begins, where it ends, but I want moms to know that you can have a voice that's different than
Mhm.
the big bully voice of the principal or school people, because sitting in that room by yourself or maybe with your partner 2 against 8
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. You
feels
gotta
terrible.
channel your inner Jen and Sheila and Terry. Like,
Yes.
imagine we're right on your shoulder
Yes,
right there
right.
and just keep fighting because it's
And
your
do what
your
I did
kid.
and stand up and say,
Yeah.
"You don't know who you're talking
Yeah.
to, lady." That's what I said.
I love that line.
Yeah.
I was like, "I don't believe in ADHD," and they were like,
Yeah.
"What?"
Terry
Well,
yelled and pointed.
you're a
Sheila
bad
Sheila
mom,
called
Sheila. You don't
Congress.
believe in ADHD.
Yep.
That's just a
Mhm.
bad mom. Like, are you
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist, whatever,
Well,
so
we're getting right at wrap up time, so it's probably a good spot for us to end here. Sheila, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
yes.
for
you.
what you are doing.
Thank you. I
Your
just
advocacy is changing the world.
I hope so. I mean, I just want to save these kids because we don't have to medicate them. We need to educate them. That's our role. And we got to get big pharma out of our schools. We really do. So if there's anybody out there who wants to do one simple thing, they can go to my website on the bar. There's a petition. You can sign it. I want to get federal hearings into the link between psychiatric drugs and mass shootings. So I need about 10,000 signatures. I think I have about 3,300. So
Yeah.
every signature helps. We are not funded by the federal government or the state. We're funded by parents throughout the country. So any donations goes directly into my advocacy. And I just really appreciate being on your show today. And thank you for bringing up this topic because it's not an easy topic for people. And
Yeah.
it's just really important.
Yeah.
It really is. So thank you for everything. And you girls are heroes. I love to hear it. You don't know who you're talking to. I love that.
Oh, well, thank you, Sheila. If you guys are stayed with us to the end here, make sure that you check out ablechild.org. And you've listened to the Gaslit Truth podcast. You can find us anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. We are also on all of the socials. You can check us out on YouTube and on Facebook and Instagram. And stay curious, everybody. Thank you again, Sheila, for being on the show. And we may have to have you back.
I would be delighted. Thank you.